Hello and welcome back to the CODA Restoration Part 2, where we are bringing this CODA Electric that was abandoned back to new. This is a brand new vehicle with 57 miles on it, and today we are getting into the actual detailing of it. So welcome back to another out-of-spec detailing video here from Clear Detailing in Northern Colorado. Let's jump into it. If you haven't already, I would definitely recommend checking out part 1 of the CODA Electric series. My friend Kyle, who actually owns this car and runs the Out of Spec Reviews channel, he and I sat down and talked about how he actually acquired this ultra rare electric vehicle. It's believed to be around 120 of these exist, and this one probably has one of the most interesting stories. A quick snapshot of that is basically this car was sold or was at the CODA of Silicon Valley by the DG group, and this car basically was abandoned in the back of the lot. The odometer literally has 57 miles on it today, nearly 13 years later from when this car was brand new. This is a 2012 CODA Electric. Such a cool story on it, and this thing has had, I would say, a rough life. As you can see, the paint is completely faded, and we are going to be doing everything to restore it back to new. Most importantly with that, as I talked about in part 1, is preserving this. These cars are so rare that they are nearly impossible to find parts for, so we're going to be talking a lot about that throughout this entire series. But I'm super excited for this. We've already got it washed. We're in here in the actual detail bay, ready to get this paint polished up nicely. This is a video I've been super excited to make, not only to work on a car with a very, very cool story, but to also push myself as a detailer, seeing if I can bring this paint back to life. As I said and talked about in part 1, this paint really needs some love. Now, if we do burn through paint, it's not the end of the world. I have talked with Kyle pretty extensively about his expectations and realistic, real-world examples of what we can actually do to this car. Obviously, as you can see here, we have clear coat failure. We also have clear coat failure here up on the roof, but we're gonna see what we can actually do to make this vehicle have a second life, if you will. So in the first part, as I said, Kyle and I went through and just gave this thing a quick bath, really knocking off all of that heavy dirt that's sat here for the past 13 years. And this paint, my oh my, needs some love. If you can hear that, it is very, very heavily contaminated, of course. Lots of tree sap, just environmental issues that have landed on this paint and caused quite a bit of problems. Now, I typically am not the guy who grabs a clay bar and clays a brand new vehicle. That's probably another topic for another video on its own. But typically, I really just don't clay cars. I find it's not super necessary. But in a case like this, it is absolutely necessary. What this is going to do is help when we actually start the paint correction phase to not have so much buildup of this contamination and not chase around things like pigtails and really heavy DA haze. The CODA here though, the big issues with it, of course, the top of the paint. This has been sun faded. Now down here, this looks a heck of a lot better. In other parts of this series, we're going to be restoring all of this trim, really making this thing shine as it should. Now, since I don't actually have typically clay bars here, I had to go out and purchase one. I just got a cheap kit here from Meguiar's, and man oh man, I just did a little test spot here. Look at the contamination coming off this. Definitely don't want that going into our pad whatsoever. So before we really get started compounding and polishing this thing, I'm going to spend a little bit of time running around the car, claying all the areas. Now I'm going to focus here on the lower areas first with the least amount of contamination to not just waste clay bars. Honestly, I'm probably going to go through an entire clay bar on the roof and the hood alone. So it only makes sense to work from cleanest to dirtiest. In this case, it's funny because this car with such low miles doesn't actually have all the road grime and dirt on the bottom. This is the cleaner area this is a filthier area, completely contrary to what we normally see on vehicles. But as you can see, just a wash here, and this thing is already breathing some serious new life into it. I'm so excited for this and hope you guys really appreciate what exactly is going into this detail. So before we keep rambling here, let's get started claying, and then we are going to actually do our first test spots on this particular CODA. You can see this spot right here. Before it even came off the trailer, I didn't even clean it. I just grabbed a pad, grabbed some polish, quickly did this section just to see what the heck would happen. But I think compound and polish is going to make this thing sparkle better than new. Can't wait for it. So we're ready to actually go in and clay bar the surface. Now, when I do clay bar, I prefer not to do it during the entire wash cycle. It just seems there's too much lubrication when it's either wet or has soap on it to actually let the clay bar dig in. In this case, we want the maximum amount of clay aggressiveness, if you will, going in there, removing contaminants. The contaminants have been baking on here and baking on here. This being a black car living in California for a long, long time has had, of course, some serious wear and tear on the paint. So let's just jump in here. Now, I will say my preference is not to use this. This is Meguiar's Quick Detailer. Just came in the kit with some clay. I didn't have any on hand. I must have run out. Had to quickly run to the store and grab some. But this is just a simple detail spray. It's not gonna add any shine to this other than picking up those contaminants. It's not gonna add anything that's actually going to harm or affect our actual paint correction in this. So free detail spray essentially that came in the kit is free detail spray. Let's use it up. Now, as I'm doing this, I can just hear the contamination coming off, and that little section created that much contamination into the clay bar. It's truly insane what happens if you just leave a car sitting outside. I can already feel the back of this becoming so much smoother. And this test spot that I did earlier feels incredible. But man, oh man, just brown gunk everywhere. Now, one thing I didn't even notice with this paint, in all honesty, until it was reasonably clean in the shop here, is it's quite a nice metallic black. And of course, before we get paint correcting, I am gonna grab the paint meter just to kind of see, for a detailer's eye of how much paint we actually have on this. Now, with this clay barring session here, I'm really not worried about scratching the paint. That's one of the biggest reasons I really don't use clay. It actually, most people don't understand. They think, oh, you put on a ceramic coating, I'm gonna clay my car every month, every 2 months, whatever it may be. This stuff actually scratches your car. So in this particular case, when the paint's just as faded as this, and we really need to go in there and get quite aggressive with compounding and polishing, it doesn't really matter if we add a few sacrificial scratches in there, because it's going to help us in the long run getting all of this crud off. But before you guys sit here and watch me do this for 30 or 40 minutes, I'm just going to finish this back section here. Insane how much crud is coming off of this paint here. And I will throw you guys on a time lapse and we will get claying the entire CODA. And boom, we are fully clay barred now. It except for the roof. I'll probably leave that until absolutely last for the paint correction stage. Now you can see again how much this is holding off. I grabbed a dry towel, tried to dry this down. This paint is just so contaminated here, but wow, it actually feels smooth even all the way down here. Okay, so already making huge headway and progress. This all feels pretty darn good. Heck yeah. So I kind of do like clay barring sometimes. Like I said, there are certain use cases for it. What it does allow me to do is kind of walk around the car or be up close to the car while I'm working on it and kind of start inspecting things and start thinking about certain things. So for instance, back here, we have a massive bird poop here that has actually quite etched the paint. Now, this may be the case where I can come in here, a little 3000 grit sandpaper, grind this down a little bit, smoothen it out, because I'm betting even if we paint correct this, you're likely gonna see the outline of this just because of how it, how the pad cuts on there. So some wet sanding may be necessary. Other few areas that I'm noticing like this, tons and tons of water spotting, a lot of haze on this side. So I would bet, of course, this car was parked with the front facing the sun most often, and then this side as well facing the sun, you know, in the late afternoons when it gets really hot, because you look here, like especially down this door, it's all matted out. And then you come over here and go, wow, that already looks pretty darn good. So very happy with that, really smooth. Noticing here on the door edges, we've of course got a little bit of chipping. I'll go in and touch all that up once we get to that particular stage. Noticing a spot here that is of little concern. See right there? It almost looks like the clear coat's kind of starting to fail there. So honestly, I don't know what I'm getting myself into here. This could go horribly wrong. I'm not thinking it's going to. We just need to be careful. Now, one thing that I've been most curious about checking out was this. And this is basically reading how much paint is actually on the CODA. Now, you guys know this has been a great tool when we do our build quality analysis on this channel to see how consistent paint is, how thin paint is. For example, one of the biggest ones that I've seen was Lucid having ultra thin paint, like under 2 mils of paint. Now you guys need to understand that typically what I see is around 4 or so mils of paint. 4 to 6 is a reasonable amount of paint. Now, within that, you of course have your primer, your color coat, and your clear coat. So that doesn't mean I have 6 mils of clear coat, an example there. It means I maybe have 1 or 2. So it's very thin. And that's very important. So let's just check this out. I honestly have no idea what this is really gonna look like. Let's put this over into mils. 6 mils. What? Okay, that was not expected whatsoever. 6.4. Unreal. Are you kidding me? Okay, still around 6 mils. What the heck? How is this so consistent so far? Guys, this is stuff that I see all the time on new cars. I put a paint meter on them. You'll see like 7 mils at the rear, 4 mils up front, and then like ultra low areas may have like 3.5. What the heck, CODA? Are you kidding me? See here where it's really faded. Okay. 7.6 there. 6.5. Holy smokes. Okay. Wow. So already that is huge news. I can't stress this enough. I honestly expected to take a paint reading, have like, you know, 0.5 mils here on the hood and like maybe 2.5, 3 mils over here on a fender or something. Are you kidding me? This is awesome. Holy crap. It's consistent. What the heck? Kyle and I both thought this thing was going to be painted like, yeah, you don't even want to know. But holy smokes, we have paint on there. And I would say a substantial amount. Unbelievable. Let's just check down here on the doors. Okay, so our lowest reading was 4.8. Are you kidding me? This is freaking awesome. So that means we can go a little bit aggressive here on the CODA. And man, oh man, I'm so pumped for this, guys. I mean, the lights, and I'm looking through the camera lens right now, it looks a lot better on camera than it really does on person. Like the paint is thrashed up here, but like areas like this and the taillights are really starting to look nice, getting it clean, getting that contamination off of there. Oh my God, I am just like over the moon pumped with this. Now, it is getting late in the day and I do have to leave to take my wife out to dinner. Yes, I still have a life outside of detailing and YouTube. So one last thing I have to do before I leave for tonight, and I'll see you guys in the morning for the full paint correction, is do a real test spot here on the hood, just right in the middle of it. Let's take some compound, get out the Meguiar's microfiber cutting disc, and let's just see what we can do to the CODA. Now let's come in here quickly to the moneymaker cabinet, as I call it, and talk about, okay, what are my thoughts for what we're actually gonna use as far as compound, and then we'll talk a little bit about polish, not so much right now, but these are all different compounds and polishes I have. I don't even know how many this is. I've got stuff like this, super heavy cut compound by Menzerna. This thing will allegedly take out 1,000 grit sanding marks, like super heavy cut. This is like kind of a nuclear bomb, if you will, as far as paint. That stuff takes out some serious deep scratches. But again, on something like the CODA, going after it and just throwing a nuclear bomb at it may not be the best situation for it. You know, my thought process is, okay, this paint's gone through quite a rough life. If I go in there and shock it, essentially just throw tons of compound, tons of speed at it, and tons of pressure, well, I would assume, I don't know, but I would assume that the results may not be exactly what we want. You know, there's a lot of friction, a lot of heat that goes into actually polishing and, more importantly, compounding a vehicle, which actually may, you know, damage the paint. We may get some twisting action and shock it and start cracking the actual clear coat on it because it is so compromised. So where I think a good starting point is this. Now, UltraCut is actually the strongest compound that CarPro makes, and you may be thinking, okay, you just spent time explaining this whole thing, why go with the strongest compound? Well, I find this stuff not to be even close to as aggressive, super heavy cut over here. I mean, a lot of times I use UltraCut on a brand new car, and what that allows me to do is bring down my pad speed, bring down my pressure, so I'm not just flying through paint when we're doing this. If you guys don't know, when you compound or polish a vehicle, you are taking off microscopic layers of paint on it. So think about it in this situation. When you need to like exfoliate your skin or something like that, you need to get the dead skin off so you can get to essentially the new skin or the new paint in this particular example, especially on areas like this on the hood. I'm actually seeing, just as this dried out, how much better this is actually looking. You can see all of the contamination and the oxidization, hello, that's a word, coming off the paint. So I'm pumped with that. So I think what we're gonna do, let's grab some UltraCut here, and then actually one of my go-tos. So I'm gonna mix these two. Now, the reason I do that, UltraCut here has a little bit shorter working time than something like the correction compound. So typically what happens is your pad gets built up with all the contamination, all the clear coat coming off into it, and it kind of starts cutting and it can start scouring. So if I add in a compound that has a longer working time, and bear in mind that D300 here, this is kind of an off-the-shelf compound, honestly. It is truly extraordinary. I used to almost use this exclusively. Pretty heavy cut, relatively low dusting, and leaves a really nice finish. So I'll kind of start mixing these and test out and see what works. I honestly think throughout this vehicle, different things are gonna work. So the hood may be something totally different from the fender, that may be totally different from the rear trunk lid. So I'll fill you in once I actually start working on this and feel how everything's going. Lastly, I think we need to talk about pad selection and pad choice. Let's come over here. So these are what I use for cutting discs, and I am one of those detailers, maybe slightly wasteful, if you will, but to me, these are worth their weight in gold. These are microfiber cutting discs. I do not use any foam for cutting pads. And I switched from that quite a few years ago, and I exclusively use these as my initial compounding stage or cutting stage, as you'll hear me talk about. Now, the nice thing with microfiber is essentially you have all of this pile in here. And what we do is call the blowout technique here. So especially on this, we're having a lot of contamination and likely a lot of paint coming actually off the car, which goes into the pad. Now in a foam pad, you can think about an inch thick pad. All of that stuff just gets wound into the actual foam. You tend to overheat foam pads, especially when you're doing pretty heavy extended periods of compounding. They get out of alignment, and I've actually had pads just completely blow up. These things are so resilient. You can hammer these things and they just take it. Now, for me personally, here at the shop, what I said was I am a little wasteful. I only use brand new pads. I don't clean them. These are one and done. So typically, like on this Rivian that's sitting over here that I just finished, I use one 7-inch Meguiar's microfiber cutting pad and a 3-inch, and they're gone. I don't deal with it. It's not worth my time. It's about 20 bucks or so in pads. And to me, it's just like, I charge quite a bit of money to detail vehicles. So let's use the best tools and techniques proper. So that's the way I think about this. But like I said, before we go, I have to test this out. So let's grab our Ultra Cut. Let's grab Meguiar's D300. And I don't know, this spot looks good. Let's get going here. You guys are gonna see this real time. Now, I think part of the case that's gonna help on this is using a little bit more compound or liquid, as we would call it, than we would normally. Now, the reason being is we have so much contamination on areas like the hood here. I think we just gotta go for it. So let's just test this section out. You guys are seeing this when I'm seeing this, and I am freaking pumped about it. So I think probably setting 4 as far as speed is a good area to start. And let's go for it. Okay, so this is an interesting thing to talk about here. So notice how I wipe that and there's nothing coming off, like it feels super smooth. You can already see how much nicer this looks. Typically we call this stiction. So typically what that means is sometimes the compound may actually be too strong for the actual paint here, because I'm assuming this paint is somewhat soft at this point. And you can't actually wipe this off. So that's kind of interesting. We'll do some more trial runs here. I think what I should do, let me grab some isopropyl alcohol. Let's wipe this down and see if we can get that off. But I hope you guys can see that on camera. Yeah, we're making massive headway already. Now I think this is probably gonna come down to, with this, is essentially doing a quick pass to get the crap off of it, and then come back and really hammer in the fresh new paint. So what I may end up doing is grabbing 2 machines and doing this in 2 stages, so essentially having a 3-stage. So a quick initial cut, especially here on areas like the hood, maybe not so much down the side of the vehicle since there's not as much contamination here, and then come back in with compound and go down at it. Now this to me is looking like we may have gone too aggressive on the actual compound. I still need to do some testing and playing around, probably off camera, spend probably a good 30, 45 minutes to an hour figuring out what works, what doesn't work, and then I start adjusting as we go. But that is freaking awesome. Well, I want to show you this from another angle so you can see what this is actually doing. And wow. Wow, that looks freaking awesome. Honestly, that's better than I expected for just a first initial try. Now, again, I grabbed Geon Prep on here, wiped off the compound. That seemed to help. So another thing that may help is upping the amount of liquid, going a little bit too crazy on it. We'll have to just see here. But as you can see, lots and lots of sparkle. This is a beautiful metallic paint here. You'll notice quite a bit of haze. Of course, I think we're gonna probably fight that for the whole compounding session. Polishing may be slightly trickier, if you will, but this result is awesome. So I think next I need to spend some time off camera testing and testing and testing, figuring out exactly what works here. What I think my next try is blow out the pad, reapply these two compounds, maybe only try the pink compound and see what the results actually look like. But I got to tell you, this transformation, if we can get the paint, 10, 15% better than this, and then polish it, refine it down, get a nice deep shine to it. Oh my gosh. I mean, just the clarity here. One thing I am noticing that'll be interesting to see, you can really see it right here, this cloudiness. It almost looks like, little pinpricks coming out of the opposite way, the actual compound, or actually on the paint. You notice here, I left the edge. I'm not gonna hammer these edges. That is one thing that is going to easily blow through paint as quick as humanly possible. But I don't know about that transformation to you. Oh, that looks pretty awesome. So let me try the blowout method, and I think I'm gonna call it a day for today. I will see you guys in the morning for day 2. So let's run through a little bit of that time lapse you just saw. So I decided to actually not start on the entire hood yet. I really want to focus on getting areas like the fenders, the doors done, the areas that aren't so heavily corroded and hazed like this. Now, the reason behind that is all of this is just going to clog our pads down here and make our job a lot harder down the side. Now, the results over here are looking truly insane. Kyle actually just showed up to look at this to see how progress was going. And I gotta say, I'm blown away myself that this paint is coming back as nice as it is. So I do wanna make a note of what I am actually using as far as compounds on this. Again, I mentioned that I may need to decrease the compounding up here because I was getting a lot of that stiction. The same cannot be said for down here. So I think a lot of these contaminants are affecting a little bit of that cut, of course, and that's what I should expect from this section. But down here, really honestly, very, very straightforward as far as the compounds that I'll typically use. So again, still using Ultra Cut, still using the D300 from Meguiar's here mixed together. I'm actually finding that the normal paint, the normal areas down here are liking quite a bit of heat. They're taking it really, really, really well, taking speed very well as well. On my large 21-inch machine here, I was actually on speed 5 using a decent amount of pressure. Of course, not overheating the panels, but it seems lots of deep scratches are coming out. So I wanted to show you here what this is actually looking like now. And as you can see, this thing is a true glitter bomb. So we have some areas like this with super deep scratches. That's gonna be kind of the case for some other ones here. This entire scratch here moved into this section kind of down here, but look at the results there. I mean, holy cow. So of course, the door here I have not worked on. You can really see, okay, there's our before, there's our after, crystal clear. Now, when Kyle was here, he asked me, oh, you're just doing a single step, right? Nope, absolutely not. I'm going to go in depth with this. He really cares about this car, he was telling me, but the results here, I mean, if we can get this hood, which I know we can, looking just as good as the rest of this, man, I think this thing is truly gonna come out incredible. So light at the end of the tunnel, 1000%. I am just having the best time with this. Again, just want to show you some examples. So up here, got this all paint corrected. I cannot believe how beautiful the metallic is on this. Very much reminds me of vehicles that I used to work on with Audi. Very similar to a Mythos black here. We have a lot of green and purple metallic, truly beautiful, but you can just see how hammered the paint was down here, and it looks like this now. So I am absolutely over the moon thrilled. I think we're gonna keep hammering down the door here. I think some areas like this, as I mentioned, and I was talking to Kyle about this, really large imperfections, probably gonna grab some 3000 grit sandpaper here, hammer this down a little bit, and should be looking quite good. Well, I hope this comes through here on camera, but I just wanted to show you what a little 50-50 looks like now that we're working down the doors. Now here, not a ton of oxidization, quite scratched up actually though, but you can see our result after just compounding this truly looks awesome. So let me get out my light here. So here's before section. So if I come in, very cloudy, very hazy, quite a few scratches, and then bam, back to clear. Again, some of these areas I think may be totally tricky to actually go in and do. You'd probably have to go crazy wet sanding. Probably little stuff like this I'm more going to leave here. We're not going for a show car here, but we're trying to give this car new life. Now down the door here, what a massive improvement this was. You can see all the scratches, boom, nice and clear. Now, of course, we still have quite a bit of haze from our actual compounding, but I'm just so thrilled with the results here. This fender is looking extraordinary. This part of the door is looking awesome. I'm, of course, as you can see here, all the tape on here, really trying to save all of this rubber. Also helps in areas like this. If you notice, we have basically a 90-degree angle here with this trim right there. If I were not to tape that off, I'm just hammering this edge with the edge of my polisher. So vice versa, when I do that little strip of edge there, I'm gonna have to put tape on the actual door side, get this section here. Yes, it's very tedious, very time consuming to tape up everything, but man, oh man, I'm thrilled with this. I really hope this comes through on camera, how glossy and how cloudy this is. But let's keep hammering along here. I just want to bring you guys in and show you, still going with the same process. Basically apply a good amount of compound. I'm liking more liquid here. I'm really liking putting a little bit of pressure onto this. Paint seems to be handling it quite well. I'm also being very mindful of edges, not trying to just hammer them. You still have to go over edges in certain situations. So definitely once we get to the door here, where there's paint missing, we'll be a little bit more gentle. So what you guys will also see me do, and I want you to just keep this in mind while watching this during the actual time lapses, when I go in, like that big scratch that was right here, I take it with my larger machine, the big 21-inch. It's funny, most people don't really understand, but actually the smaller 3-inch diameter pad actually cuts quite a bit harder. For number one, you have more heat in a very dedicated area rather than spread out literally double, almost triple the size of the pad. So there's a little bit more heat going into there. It has more cutting ability. Also, you're putting more compound on a tinier pad typically than you are a larger. So that's why you'll see areas like that where I went over even twice, adding compound, blowing the pad out, adding more compound, doing another entire pass, and then I come back in and refine those little details. Same as goes down here. That big pad is not as good and can't really centralize the cutting power once you get to areas like this, or even up here for that matter. It really helps to have both of those machines go in there. They're really different machines. You could definitely do an entire car with a 3-inch, but when you get to these bigger flat panels like this, or areas on the hood, it really helps to use the big 21, refine deeper scratches if you can in certain areas. But I'm thrilled with this. Let's keep moving on. So on the trunk lid here, now I haven't actually done this quarter panel, but I wanted to focus on this area and play around with this a little bit. So what I think is going to happen here, if I were to come in and try to buff this, this will probably stay in the actual paint, leave this bird poop mark here. So what I've done is just grab some 2500 grit sandpaper. We're not going to go super aggressive on this. Grabbed a little rid block here. And we're just going to do a little bit of wet sanding on this, seeing how we can make this look a little bit better. This is just clear water in an empty bottle here. Let's get this ready to go. And let's just see what we can do here to this mark. Try and knock it down a little bit. Again, we're not trying to go super aggressive here, but I just want to see, okay, will sanding help some of these spots that are a little more aggressive than I would say to like here. Okay, let's check this out. Let's let that dry. So that did quite a bit here. Of course, we're using 2500 grit, nothing crazy. I can still see the impression in there. It may have completely compromised the clear coat, but at least we're going to give this a little bit better chance of coming out properly. Wow, that's looking a lot better there. So I think maybe a little bit more. I can still see it's etched deep into the clear coat, but I still think this will help this section come back substantially more. Great. Okay, let's dry this off. And I think now let's do a little compounding on that section and let's see how we did. I have a feeling this is going to help a ton to this section. So you'll see Realtime here. I'm grabbing Ultra Cut a little bit stronger here in this particular area. Let's go for it. So this is really what I expected here. It has etched the clear coat pretty substantially in this particular area. This is a particular area where my, eye for perfection really has to say, okay, stop. So you guys saw in the last clip, I stopped it off there. After I buffed this, I said, off camera a little bit, I went, okay, I don't think it looks that great. Let's hit it one more round with a little bit of 2500 grit sandpaper, buff it out, and this is the result of that. Now, I would say this is, of course, not perfect. Nothing on this car is really perfect. It's looking extraordinary. The top of these doors look phenomenal. Really happy with those. But you get to this point as a professional detailer where you just have to go, stop. You can't go anymore. And what do I mean by that? Well, let's look up close here at this etching. Now, I want you to pay attention to basically this light bar here that runs around. If you really look into this, this is actually little microscopic craters. So think about your paint like this. They're kind of doing one of these situations. Now, when you see the white marks through it, that has completely eaten all the way through the clear coat and the color coat. So this is nearly down to either primer, bare metal. You can really get a good idea there of how deep that stain is. Around here, again, same exact thing. You can see how pitted that clear coat is. Now, a lot of you are gonna say, I'm probably gonna have somebody goes, oh, just wet sand the heck out of that. You can get that out, no problem. Realistically, we are not making this a show car. If Kyle wanted a perfect show car, I would have just told him, dude, repaint the entire thing, replace everything that you can, and then go from there and we can buff and polish it. We're just restoring here. So keep that in mind. There's going to be things on this vehicle that are absolutely not perfect, but just looking at this, look at what a massive difference we made there. That stain looked 10 times worse. So there are times as a detailer, you just have to say, okay, no more. You need to look at the big picture of this entire vehicle and go, okay, Kyle got this for free. He's not going to put 10 grand into a paint job, you know, unless he looks at this and goes, I want the paint perfect, then he may do that. But that is not my decision to make, nor is it what we're going to try to do with this detail. It's a restoration, a preservation detail, but I'm happy with this. I would say this is okay. You'll notice around here as well, all these little dots, this is all basically tree sap that has sat on the vehicle. And essentially all those little white spots have completely failed in that area with actual clear coat. You can see it here and here. All of these little areas have eaten away at the clear coat over the 13 years it's sat there. You never know, this bird poop could have been, you know, 2012 bird poop and just sat on there. It really hasn't had a wash for that long. So it's important to keep that in mind. But I'm thrilled with the results, guys. I hope you guys appreciate that and can understand really what goes into this, because the big picture is very different than scrutinizing every single little imperfection on here. But man, oh man, some of these sections, especially down the doors, I'm just thrilled with. Let's give you a little bit of a status update. So these are the doors, of course, on the passenger side here. You can see how heavily hazed these were. Now, what you just watched the clip before this was this panel, and look at our results here, friends. Holy smokes. So what you actually saw me do in this particular area was wet sand with 2000 grit. Now, typically, yes, you could go way more aggressive. Again, the thing with this is we're trying to preserve it. We're trying to knock out a lot of these issues and just make it look better. And I would say we accomplished just that. It seems to me this side of the car has basically sat underneath what I would only assume is a pterodactyl nest, if you know what I mean. Lots of bird poop residue under here, especially in this particular area. So going in there, knocking it down with 2000 grit seemed to be the right way to go about it. But this, well, before and after, just looks absolutely incredible. So we actually got a lot of the texture knocked down. I tried not to go too aggressive. That's why I think, okay, 2000's really where I want to stop. Had to go a little heavier in some areas, as you saw, but we're kind of running into the same issue over here. This is all these spots right here are completely failed clear coat. There's nothing we can really do with that. But man, oh man, I gotta just say, this thing is looking stunning. I've also been hard at work getting all of this rear end compounded, and man, oh man, is the CODA looking incredible. Look at that shot right there. If you were in disbelief that I was going to pull this thing off and make it look a heck of a lot better, I think we are proving all of you wrong. I am pumped with this. So really, really happy. This is a messy, messy project, folks. all the compound dust. You can see it up here. I've wiped this trunk lid 100 times. It is just so much residue coming off of the paint and really compounding crazy hard on this thing. I'm actually very impressed, in all honesty, with the paint on this CODA. It seems to pretty much take whatever you throw at it. And yeah, pretty pumped with that. Like I said, I could go in here, knock everything down quickly with 1200 grit sandpaper and just hammer this thing, but that's not really what we're after. So as you can see over here, this is what I was seeing before. Basically stains like this. So some pretty hard bird poop stains there. Definitely some water spotting in this area. This is a really hammered section, so I'm anxious to test this out. But little spots like this, what I was finding is, okay, I'd buff over it and those would still stay. Typically, this is kind of bubbled up the clear coat, if you will, in areas like this. So what I'll likely do, mask this off. I'll probably wet sand this entire section. Same with this section up here, and we'll go back in and of course hit it. Now, this particular area up here, I'm gonna probably say, other than maybe single spots like this, I don't think it makes any sense to try and wet sand this. First off, it's very tight. Now, yes, you can get in here, but going crazy like that in certain areas may be a little bit too extreme. Then you're putting a lot of heat on an edge like this, and the risk of burning that after wet sanding it, having to compound it quite heavily multiple times, could cause some serious issues. So I would say on this particular panel, yes, I may go in, hammer an area like that with a little wet sand and go over it. But I think realistically, trying to wet sand that entire thing is probably not in the cards. Now this area back here, we'll see, you can see quite a bit of spots in here, like this over here, these couple of imperfections, something like this. We'll kind of see. I'll polish this up or compound it quickly, see how it kind of reacts. If I feel, okay, it's actually looking okay, of course I'm not gonna wet sand that. But this result here is truly, like, I'm mind blown that we've got to this stage. The paint looks insanely good. And as you can see, all the wet sanding residue coming off. I do want to say one thing that you guys are not going to be able to grasp over camera, and that is the smell coming off of the paint, especially when I've got over to this side working over here. I don't know how to describe it other than it smells like dead paint. This is something a detailer knows all too well. Say you're working on like a 2002 911, the Porsche or the paint is very hammered. You just get this old paint smell on it, and man, oh man, it smells even just wet sanding it. It's a really interesting smell, but yeah, keep hammering along here. Can't wait. So next couple of sections, you're going to see these doors get done. Then my pads are starting to get to the point where they are pretty much cooked. So we're going to jump onto the hood here, and I'm going to do the driver's side first. Now, what I'll do here, like I said in the beginning, I use one pad per car. This one being a little bit more extreme, really expecting to use basically 2, maybe 3 7-inch pads and 2, maybe 3 of the 3-inch pads. We'll just kind of see, but this will be like the last test here on the hood with these pads. Toss them out, get a new one, and start hammering away. This is a very important section to learn on, and really why I didn't start with the roof. Now, the hood, of course, we've already done test spots. I kind of have a rough idea how that's going to come out. But this section I knew was compromised. And what I mean by compromised, I knew that the clear coat was very thin here. You could just see it. You can tell basically it looked like this in the middle in one of the certain sections. So this here is 100% clear coat failure in this entire area. Definitely on the edges here, this can probably be polished out a little bit, but this you see here is basically faded clear into just the black paint. So no clear coat really over this section. Now, we had very similar stuff going on here. So a lot of people who think they know what they are talking about are going to say, well, why would you sand that area? You just went through the paint. We did have a little bit of paint failure here. So on this edge up here, and as you can see, this really shiny spot right here, that's where the actual clear coat has essentially completely failed. Now, sandpaper, for most of you that don't know, is typically a lot less aggressive than going in here and just compounding. And that may not make sense to you, but we're using 2000 grit sandpaper here. We're not hammering this down with 1000 grit or 1200. This is 2000 grit, really not very aggressive. A lot of guys will finish with 2500 or 3000. So it's just a step below that. So keep that in mind. And I knew this particular area here, with how dark it was, again, looking very similar to this up here, was definitely of concern. So I said, okay, let's sand this area. Let's go a little less aggressive, these surrounding parts in here. Let's make it look as good as we can. I did a very quick wet sand on this, nothing super crazy. But I want you guys to understand that sandpaper, a lot of the time, way less aggressive. You're not putting in heat. You have to think of compound as essentially liquid sandpaper. And the shortcomings of that is it adds in a lot of heat. So when I compounded this particular area, I was quick over it. I turned down my speed, didn't let it get super hot in this area. But again, we did have some clear coat complete failure. This right here, this is what happens when bird stains sit on here. So, and then when we buffed over this, took over the slightest bit of clear coat on there, and yes, we had a little bit of paint failure. But I would say this section looks a heck of a lot better than how it looked looking like this. So I think we are improving this, but it should be said, as far as compounding this section, no more. So that's the best we can do here. We'll definitely polish this, we'll definitely coat it, put some protection on there, and I think it'll look pretty good. I mean, this looks 10 times better than looking like this. So we have to take our wins, we have to take our losses in certain case, but I don't believe myself to be doing and going through the clear coat here in negligence, if you will, or pushing it too hard. I knew this section was going to be very challenging, and I didn't think leaving it like this made any sense when we could get a result more apt to this. So win-win, I don't know. But we're gonna keep moving on here again with the very, very messy progress, and I'm so pumped to get working on the hood. We have a lot to talk about. So I started this project going into it thinking we were going to make a huge transformation, and man, oh man, did we ever. The thing with that is time, and time just got out of control with this particular project. I really started figuring out this paint and said, okay, I am going to kind of put a pause on this. I had a few other details over the holidays. Then we actually traveled all the way to Austin, Texas to do some Cybertruck content. So this poor car has really been sitting quite a while, and I've been able to work a few hours here and there on it, filming a few clips. But here we are. So video 2 here, we are actually done with the paint correction. Now, as you may be able to tell, mirrors and roof are still looking very, very matte. So I have done a little bit of testing on these to see if I can bring these back. And my findings were basically total, completely, and absolutely clear coat failure here. So we'll talk a little bit about this. I do want to walk you around the car and show you everything that we've done so far. Now, of course, after the paint correction, it's been hours and hours and hours diving into this paint. What I've been really impressed with is it's actually good paint underneath. I hope you guys can see how nice this thing is looking. Some of those 50-50 shots were truly extraordinary. Now, I never thought I would get into this video and be wet sanding the whole hood, different portions of the vehicle, but I'm pretty darn happy with it. Now, we did have a few little edge failures that I do want to show you. There was only one in particular on the front bumper and a totally compromised door back here. So I'll show you those areas, but I'm pumped with how this project is coming out. I hope you guys understand that it's been so busy here through the holidays and traveling and doing all this and still running a business at the same time. So I do apologize that this video is coming out later than I anticipated. I wanted to have this whole series up and done before the new year began, but with life comes got to be able to adapt. So let's give a walk around this thing, talk about our next steps on this car, and follow along with the series. Again, I'm gonna have to put this a little bit on the back burner. We're still waiting for the registration here on the CODA to finally come in so Kyle can actually drive it. It's cold outside, so we've got a little bit of time, unfortunately. But yeah, this project, I just want to say, taking a lot more time than I expected, but this one's really kind of a passion project for me to push my limits and abilities a little bit more on a car that realistically probably needed to be resprayed. Now, in areas like this, I'm going to talk a little bit more about what we're planning on that. I think wrapping it is probably the best idea with a gloss black vinyl up here. We'll probably film that in the upcoming weeks, if not months. We'll see how that goes, but let's continue and move around the CODA. So a few things I do want to highlight. So this is the area that I basically tried here to fully paint correct. And you can see it somewhat started to come back, but I was getting a lot of black transfer off there, meaning that we are going to fully compromise the mirrors and take all the black paint off if we're trying to make this look any better. So I had to go, okay, I'm gonna make an executive decision and say, it's not worth the time in this. Now, what I want you to notice over here is basically how the clear coat has failed in this fade all the way down. Very similar issue going on here on the roof. So this particular area has zero clear coat on it. It fades out to the clear, and this is more of the black like here on the paint. I just kind of felt the time spent to get this back, it's not going to look great. The results aren't going to look great. I'm imagining this is going to just completely burn through. So I think spending a little bit less time doing that and just getting that vinyl wrapped, get the mirrors wrapped, is going to make this project look a heck of a lot better. But look at the gloss on this thing. I genuinely never thought we would see the day that this CODA really came back to it. Now, as you can see, just compound everywhere. This thing has been so messy. The crap that has come off the paint has been truly extraordinary. So you'll remember in some of the clips, areas like this, I went in and wet sanded, and this was the area with a little bit of clear coat compromise, as you can see right here, where something has completely eaten through. I think we hid that enough, and I'll be curious to see in the progressing videos how this actually looks once we start doing the polish and ceramic coatings and really final details. I've already compounded the taillights here, looking crystal clear. The difference is huge. Now, this does not look pretty right now. I always say this when cars come in for paint correction and all of the whole ordeal. They got to get kind of ugly before they get really pretty, and we are in definitely that ugly phase. So next steps, of course, are going to be doing a full bath all over it. Now, with that, we're going to be cleaning up other portions on the vehicle, scrubbing down all the rubber here, opening up areas like the door jambs here, and getting these all cleaned out with all the crud that has sat there for years. But man, I am just so pumped with how this thing is turning out. Again, I never thought we'd see the day of the CODA having very bright black paintwork on it. I'm really, really thrilled with the results here. Now let's come up here as we move down the doors to the hood. The hood was a project in all its own. I think I probably spent, in all reality, probably 4 or so hours just doing the hood here, and the results, I mean, they speak for themselves. There's some areas like up here, yes, we do have clear coat failure, but man, oh man, it looks a heck of a lot better. Moving over here, you guys saw that spot. Yeah, that's going to be some areas where I don't think we can go much more than that. You'll see how this black in here got really shiny. This is totally compromised. So theoretically, yes, we could get this fixed, but I think the roof's going to look a lot more like this and probably 10 times worse. Now, I have been playing with the headlights a little bit. So this one is completely how it came to me here at the shop, and I'll give you a sneak preview how much better that looks. Wait for that in an upcoming dedicated video about headlights. So I'm thrilled with the results here, but I think next I'm going to end this video off and we're going to get washing the CODA here and continue with the full detail process. Thanks so much for watching another out of spec detailing video. We'll see you in the next one soon. Bye-bye.